so this shows these companies were all rated based on different colors. So black if they're really very, they've got very poor standards, green if they're excellent, and things in the middle. And this is before the program, this is after the program, and the number of red firms goes down, the number of red and black sort of goes down over here, and the number of yellow clearly has gone up, and blue has gone up. Still no green, but at least they're moving towards compliance. And you can look at which types of firms are the ones that are moving from the red and black into the yellow and blue, and really it's largely the firms you would expect, owned by foreign companies, that are privately owned, that have to compete for the market share, that are export oriented, that were also more profitable to begin with, and have the capacity to make these changes. This is the paper that looked at the effects of a green rating program in India. And so in India, they did the Center for Science and Environment, CSE, ran a program where they rated firms in 3 different sectors: paper and pulp, automobile, and chlor-alkali. And they looked at, and they made those ratings, they announced the ratings, and then they looked at what happened to the stock market returns of those companies. And they basically found that there was a 19% reduction in the stock market returns after the announcement for one set of, for paper and pulp. They didn't find the same results for automobile and other chemical company. And here they gave them basically ratings. So 1 leaf was the worst, and 2 to 3 leaves were better, and 5 leaves was the best. And so you can sort of, or maybe it was, that's right. And so you can see that this is the stock market, change in the stock market return after the announcement. So right after the announcement, the returns for the better firms went down a little bit, not too much. But for the really poor performers, there was a big reduction in their stock market returns. So the point being that even in India, people care about it, and they look out for performance and so on. They also looked at whether that led these firms in the paper and pulp industry to improve their performance. And they looked at, this is COD, and this is total suspended solid. And the disclosure happened in 1999 for the paper and pulp industry, and then they looked at what happened after that in the next 5-6 years, and they found that the ones which were the worst polluters, which was here, so this was for all the firms. On average, there was an improvement, but the biggest benefit was actually so the worst polluters were this. And they had some reduction, but not as much. And then the ones that were actually the better firms, reduced their pollution much more. So there is some impact, and and so then it kind of leads to this question of, can you rely on information disclosure? Just go out, get the information, give it to the public, and let the public in the stock market create the incentives, and firms will respond. And again, there's a lot of skepticism really about whether you can do that, because all these programs are really pilot programs. They are trying to run at a national level a program that gathers detailed information and makes it publicly available. Requires quite a bit of an administrative effort. The question, is this information credible? And to establish credibility, you have to have monitoring and reporting and and things that are fairly not susceptible to corruption and bribery, and you have to have an infrastructure and so on. So because information only has value if it is trustworthy and credible. If it isn't, you can put it out there and nobody will pay attention to it. So establishing that requires inspections, monitoring, verification, enforcement, and in many developing countries, that is lacking, and for the same reasons that it is preventing them from the already existing environmental regulations. I mean, the same problems will also influence their ability to provide information in a credible way. So if they can't do one, it's not clear that they can do the other more effectively. And then the second part of requiring, or the second important condition for information disclosure to work, is that there has to be a consequence for that information with that information disclosure. So in the U.S., information disclosure leads to more scrutiny by regulators on firms that are big polluters, and it leads to investors and NGOs and others paying attention and penalizing them. In developing countries where the regulatory threat is already weak to begin with, you can provide this information, but it may have no impact because the investors know that the government is not going to come after these firms because they never, there just isn't that mechanism. So if you don't have that concern that these firms will have to pay huge fines and liabilities, and their profits may be lower in the future, so let's not invest in them. If those concerns are missing, then providing this information is not going to have any major implications for this firm. So the point here, I mean, again, this is an area for active research. It's requires further thinking. Most of this work has been in developed country context, and suitability of that for developing countries is something that would be really interesting to do. The other reason why these approaches might struggle is because you don't have the strong base of consumers who care about environmental attributes, and a lot of it is education and income driven. And so you can provide, and then there's this concern about credibility, because here we're not even sure about whether to trust standard labels on products, that there isn't, adulteration. And so the expectation that somebody who's saying they've gone beyond just the normal production process to produce something that is really green will require a lot of trust building and brand building and so on before consumers will be willing to pay a high price for it. So most of the evidence from whether these efforts improve environmental performance, even in developed countries, is fairly mixed. And there is a general perception that a lot of this is symbolic and not substantive, and that in fact you might even you're letting these companies get away with not doing very much, but pretending to do it. And the part of the challenge is that most of these programs, you only have information on the practices they did and they participated. But you don't have any information on their environmental performance. Is just not available. So you can't really see whether or not they've actually improved their performance. And it's really difficult to track these outcomes. Environmental performance is self-reported, and so the question is this enough? And I think I've probably made the case here that it's not going to be enough, or at least there's not enough evidence to suggest that it would be enough, and that there's not really a great substitute for having your domestic sort of strong regulatory pressures and a credible threat of regulation, which is needed for making these approaches effective. So just end with this, which is, we started with this and saying that, firms will do this if it is in their self-interest, which means that firms that do this should be more profitable, because otherwise, why are they doing it? And again, determining whether or not this in fact improves their financial performance suffers from the same causality and endogeneity problems that affect any measurement of outcome. And so there's been a lot of research trying to do this comparison of are companies that are more responsible environmentally, socially, are they also more profitable? And the empirical evidence is really mixed. And studies have looked at, you can see this has been going on for 30 to 40 years, and you find positive, negative, and non-negative relationships here. So, and quite a bit of it is because many of these are not even done in a sound way. There's more correlation than causation. So you have to really take these results with a big grain of salt. So again, this is an area for further research. It's not so much whether or not they're profitable, but really under what conditions will these voluntary efforts improve profitability. What kind of markets do you need in order for these firms to be able to benefit from differentiating their products and reaching out to new consumers and new investors and so on. All right, so so that's sort of what I have, and I'm happy to have you react to this and say what do you think about this? Do you think this could work in India?
Better to start with a voluntary program.
What?
It's better to start with voluntary program in India rather than not having any protocols instead of things.
Right. I mean, it's better to have that, than not have any regulation. But I mean, I suppose it would depend on how much. To some extent, I suppose, just giving public recognition to those firms and so on might help. You could imagine, the Modi government announcing a program and then, front headline photographs of the companies that make efforts, leading some companies to do it. But the question is, a lot of the pollution is generated by these small and medium enterprises, and not by the Unilevers and the big companies. So will these companies take action? So Professor Bansal and I are working on this, on the Corporate Social Responsibility Act, and we find that only about 20% of the companies that are required to actually spend 2% of their profits on CSR are even doing it. So 80% of the companies are not doing it, even though it's a mandatory act that is being passed. So that's sort of the issue.
Madam, I have a different question. Do you think that DDT, which is a pesticide, is a pollutant? Because if you see DDT, it has saved millions of lives, not only in the developing countries. It is also it has also increased the production of foods. From that perspective, do you think that DDT can be
I think it's been banned, no?
It is banned in India.
Yeah, it's banned.
Do you think it is a pollutant from cosmetic perspective?
I guess so. I don't know. I mean, I'm presuming that it was banned for a reason. Whether, I mean, in general, most economists would say that if you can, you really shouldn't ban anything, because you have to. In some places, maybe that is the most effective thing, and so it can be used selectively in some areas and not in others. I'm not sure about DDT in particular. What was the rationale for banning it and whether that was justified or not. But typically, banning is not necessarily a great idea unless it's so bad that and there are better alternatives available. And I'm not sure if that was the case here.
In poor countries, mosquitoes.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You had all this dengue and malaria, and I don't know if there are good alternatives out there. Yeah.
But still using it in India. I mean, with a different brand name.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Selective use is very difficult to implement.
Yeah.
Because if you know that some pesticide works, and a gardener or a farmer would think beyond it.
Yeah, right.
That would be one.
Right. And that, if you can't, enforcing selective uses and finding and making sure, monitoring that, and that's why it's preferred to ban. At least that way you can, just prevent its sales altogether. but there might still be, some people may still be willing to pay for it just so that that may be the only effective way to grow their, do whatever activities. So, yeah.
Politicians who are mostly small, they are not listed in the stock market, so the information disclosure.
Right. Yeah, that's the issue. The small ones are not listed in the stock market. That's what?
Unorganized firms.
Yeah, it's the unorganized firms, and they are,
They don't care for reputation.
Yeah.
They don't care for
consumers.
and NGO will not even invest the time and
Yeah.
effort in.
Yeah. NGO will also go after the firms that have got deep pockets because they know they can extract millions and whatever, they can get them to pay up. If the small firms are not, will go bankrupt, they can shut their thing and close up here and open somewhere else. So the informal sector is huge in developing countries, and that's another big problem.
That's an area of
Yeah.
attention.
Right. So what do you do with the informal
Innovative
sector?
ways.
Yeah.
Formalize it.
Yeah, to formalize it, or somehow figure out how to reduce their environmental impact. I mean, it's really bad.
40% GDP of India comes from the small businesses. No?
Yeah.
Remember data from these become an facing.
Yeah. Finding the data from them.
Yeah, especially from the unorganized sector, even whatever is available on the secondary basis, most of these are covered under the organized sector,
Yeah.
but not on the unorganized. Especially leather firms, when I'm looking at, most of the around 70 to 80% of the firms are actually in the small and the medium sector. So, but then still whatever the data we have is mostly of the firms which are from the organized sector, but a hell lot of products actually come from the unorganized part.
Yeah.
So even when I'm doing an analysis or saying something about its performance or something, it's actually the organized sector I can talk about.
Mhm.
But even the unorganized
Yeah.
sector is so important.
ASI also doesn't have.
Ma'am, ASI does, but it gives the organized
In the organized
sector.
But if government can collect household level data, if
could,
there is a bill,
yeah.
they can very well collect data from unorganized.
Yeah.
And one problem is like even when NSSO sometimes does, but it does it for a different level, and even in ASI when they give it for a particular industry, they give a cross-section data.
Yeah.
So so at times that people of course will say, how are you? They panel data, but it is for because I had inquired and worked actually on my ASI data. So aggregate industry basis, they do give you a panel data, but if you're working only for a particular industry, they don't. So then you have to work on your cross sections.
Can I give you one suggestion? I think you may develop some more hypotheses like Madam has developed. Because I think that was very good paper, the EPA paper.
Right, but the thing you can develop, but you still need data to test them. That is the thing. You still need that. Yeah. I mean, I think, and the other challenge also in terms of, whether such approaches will work, I mean, apart from how to test it, is that in many places the firms are also the sources of employment.
Yes.
So the people are not going to do anything that will jeopardize their jobs and lead to the shutdown of these factories, even though they know they might be, polluting. And ultimately, it's, if the public were to rise up against a firm, then that is the most sort of, the most forceful way to get them to change. But that requires a lot of civic action and consumers and particularly from the informal sector, the products that they're producing are not differentiated. You don't know what's coming from which firm, so there's no brand names associated with them, and that the consumers don't know what they're getting.
Action may not come from consumers, but I still like that idea of information disclosure.
Yeah.
So, if I'm staying in an area, I might like to look around who are the most polluting ones.
Yeah.
So, if we have that data disclosure even for the informal sector,
Yeah, that is
I
true.
think that will work.
Yeah.
That might work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the pollution control boards, if they could even be asked to, they could make the information that they have available to the public. That can go a long way.
Right, I don't know what they're doing with
Yeah.
that information.
Right.
Initially, they have just started the spatial environmental planning
Uh-huh.
at the organized sector level. I mean, they are just trying to identify the areas where the polluting industries are located and accordingly direct the further location of polluting industries into that particular area.
Yeah.
So, trying to control that. But then again, also, ma'am, there is a lot of compliance issue. I mean, already the existing polluting firms are not compliant,
Yeah.
and then again some others are also going into that particular location. So it's like aggravating the entire problem. So another issue is also the regulation implementation in India.
Yeah.
The lobbying effect is very important.
Yeah.
I mean, so how the large firms are actually lobbying to kind of relax the regulations and things are not working out. Maybe on the pen and paper it's there, proper regulations, but when it's implemented,
That's
It's
true.
a
And
huge
that's,
gap.
it's true across a lot of developing countries. They have often more stringent standards than the developed countries on the books, but when it comes to implementation, they're not implementing because either they're unable to, or they're ineffective, or there's lobbying or corruption or what's going on.
Even at the stage when they are writing down these standards, they don't think whether it's implementable or not.
Yeah.
Because I've been part of some, like this policy making in the government, and I know what they're writing. It's not even possible to do sometimes. I was on this genetically modified committee, and they would say that they won't even define a threshold. So if you don't define a threshold, there's no way you can implement the law. So they're not even thinking in terms of whether this can be implemented or not. Maybe on paper they just want to show that ours is like more stringent than our neighbors, or we just copy from Europe or US. Okay, I think we'll take a short break and at 4 o'clock we'll reconvene. And also just announce tomorrow we'll have there'll be a student evaluation forms. We'll give you a form sometime. You can give evaluation first. There'll be students' presentations and we have distribution of certificates. And we have a group photograph of all the participants together, followed by lunch, which I think these guys have planned a spread. Yeah. Okay. So we can take a break now. Comprises of research students presenting some of the research ideas, and everybody in the audience could give them feedback on what suggestions or something that's not clear. Okay, so we'll just begin with Shiv.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm Shivani Gupta. I'm a PhD student at CITD JNU. I'm working in area of health economics, and today I would be presenting my PhD research proposal titled Effect of Nutritional Status on Health Outcomes and Economic Analysis. So let's first begin with the background for
And
this.
I guess you guys know that just
5
5
minutes.
minutes
Yeah.
for everyone.
So we'll start with the background for the study. So inadequate nutrition and its adverse impact on health is a major concern in both developing and developed world. In fact, if we look at FAO 2014 estimates, about 39% of adults are overweight, 13% are obese, and 11% are undernourished. And if there's a very popular index which is BMI, body mass index, which is simply weight to height measure, weight of an individual in kilogram divided by height in meters, square of height in meters, and this index is used to categorize an individual as underweight, normal weight, overweight or obese. So depending upon different threshold values of BMI, less than 18.5 underweight, 18.5 to 25 normal weight, above 25 overweight, above 30 it would be obese. So we use this index to categorize individual as overweight, normal weight or underweight. So now looking at the obesity level, so my research would be primarily focusing upon effect of overnutrition, or basically overweight and obesity prevalence on health outcomes among population in India and United States. And if we look at WHO 2014 estimates, like 2010 and 2014 estimates, the overweight and obesity prevalence has been rising across the globe for each and every country. And now if we look at obesity and overweight problem in India for male and female population for NFHS round 3 and 4, which is for 2005 and 15 data, then across every state, so I've listed only few states, so in all these states we can witness a clear rise in overweight and obesity prevalence. This shows that apart from the undernutrition, which is already imposing a lot of health burden in Indian context, overnutrition is now coming as an upcoming issue or concern in Indian context. So now this gives, in fact, one can expect that overweight and obesity prevalence to have an adverse impact on life expectancy and non-communicable diseases prevalence like diabetes, hypertension and heart strokes. And this brings us to our first research question, which is testing the effect of overweight and obesity prevalence on life expectancy for India and United States. And the regression that we would be estimating is given over here. So life expectancy would be our dependent variable, and these are the independent variable: obesity, health expenditure, undernourishment and other control variables. And we do expect that as obesity and overweight prevalence rise, initially life expectancy will improve, and eventually when obesity and overweight prevalence is reaching very high level or a certain level of threshold, then the life expectancy or health outcomes will start having a negative impact, or they will start having a detrimental effect or experience detrimental effect of overweight and obesity. Hence, to capture that inverted U relationship or the concave nature of the graph, we are introducing this obesity square term. And of course, we do have some endogeneity issues in the right hand side variables. So for that we would be introducing appropriate instrument variables. So we would be looking into that later. So now let's discuss the second research question of my thesis, in which I would be now discussing the adverse impact of overweight and obesity on non-communicable diseases. So one was like health outcomes. Now we are discussing how it would affect non-communicable diseases like diabetes or hypertension and heart strokes. For that we will again estimate a similar equation of this type, but the dependent variable would, instead of life expectancy, would be diabetes or hypertension prevalence. And apart from that, we do expect that life expectancy would be affected by overweight obesity through diabetes. So overweight and obesity prevalence affecting non-communicable diseases, and they having a detrimental effect on life expectancy. So to capture that kind of effect, we would also be estimating a simultaneous equation model, for which the tentative structure of structural equations is given as in this slide. So first in this we have life expectancy, diabetes and health expenditure and as endogenous variables, and rest are exogenous variables. So we would be estimating SEM model to capture the effect of effect of overweight obesity on life expectancy coming through non-communicable disease. And then finally the third research question is going to be would be tested for Indian context only. So in India we already know that there is a lot of burden from undernourishment, and apart from that overnutrition is an upcoming problem. So we would be estimating the effect of high prevalence of anemia on health outcomes among children in under 5 age group. So anemia prevalence in India has been rising, and this has been shown in NFHS round 2, 3 and 4. And literature suggests that higher prevalence of anemia is likely to have a detrimental effect on cognitive and physical growth among children. And to estimate how adversely anemia prevalence affects health outcomes among children, we would be considering health outcomes as say stunting, wasting, underweight, and other variables would be under 5 mortality rate, diarrhea and acute respiratory infections. And also we know that maternal characteristics do have a significant impact on child health outcomes. So to control for that, we will also introduce variables related to maternal characteristics. So this would be the final hypothesis that we would be testing. So this completes my presentation. Thank you. So I've discussed this entire thing with Madhu ma'am yesterday only, and so I would be looking forward to comments from the audience, any suggestions or any insight that you feel, maybe very general, intuitive one.
I guess just a couple other thoughts. In your second question, you have
Diabetes and
you have diabetes as a dependent variable in the second equation, but you don't include it as an explanatory variable for life expectancy.
yeah. But for that we are having an SEM model in the second part,
Yeah,
for
but
which
still, why wouldn't diabetes affect life expectancy?
okay, in the first also.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have that to check for the robustness, or maybe we can have other.
Right. So the thing is that I think you're mixing up simultaneous equation model and seemingly unrelated models. I mean, you have to be clear on whether you're doing a seemingly unrelated where you have three equations and their error terms are correlated, or you're doing a simultaneous equation model in which endogenous variables in one equation become the dependent endogenous explanatory variables in one equation become a
Dependent
variable in another
other.
equation. And if you're doing that, then you have to be very clear about, for every endogenous variable that's included in one equation, you have to have a variable that's excluded and included in another equation. And
Yeah.
so you have to be really careful about setting those up, which gets back to then how you're dealing with endogeneity even there. So I think that is not very clear yet in what you presented.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll be looking forward to it.
Okay, do you want to tell us what comments did you get yesterday?
Yeah, regarding the endogeneity in health expenditure in the first equation, and also endogeneity in obesity prevalence, because income levels are also going to affect obesity, like a richer income group are likely to be more obese, as well as they are the ones who would be more aware and will have better access to health facilities and have higher life expectancy.
So, I mean, if you have GDP per capita, would that
Yeah,
control
but
for
that I discussed because we were planning to have GDP per capita as an IV for health expenditure, and we tried regression for that, but again she was saying that GDP per capita would affect both obesity and life expectancy. Higher GDP.
No, so I'm okay. So even if I have as an explanatory variable, that also.
But so the thing is that firstly this is all cross-sectional. You don't have a panel. You don't really
Yeah,
have
for now we are doing the pilot study on the
Okay.
panel data for US economy,
Yeah.
but yeah, we will try to expand it to, it's cross-sectional, but we'll try to have a panel.
Yeah. So if you have panel, then you control for a lot of individual or state-specific factors that would that you don't have observable data for. If you don't have fixed effects, then there's so many other factors that are not being controlled for. It becomes a little bit more problematic. And then even with fixed effects, you run into the question of what is going to be the instrument for obesity and for health expenditures that will affect these two variables but not directly affect
Right.
health
Right.
outcomes. And GDP per capita income can affect life expectancy because you have better access to healthcare, you're more educated. There's so many other things that come with higher income that you may not have control for. So, so it's hard to think about what would be a good instrument for obesity that is not going to directly affect health outcomes. And I don't have a good answer for you, but
Yeah.
same thing with anemia and immunization.
Yes.
They're both endogenous variables.
Yeah, we discussed that.
Do we need an instrument for obesity?
Yeah. So, like, poor exercise can affect obesity and life expectancy. You're not controlling for exercise, so you don't know whether you can't attribute the life expectancy to obesity. It could be because, yeah.
Saying
Your
higher
locations, and they're
increase.
both in the south.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder whether it's something related to the diets in those areas, rice versus
Rice
wheat, or what is going on. And typically, you know, you don't think of, I mean, I don't know, you typically don't think of South Indians as being obese. I mean, most South Indians I know are pretty thin people. And you see much more obesity in the north. I mean, just as a matter of, you know, observation.
General observation,
Yeah,
yes.
but interesting. There's definitely something worth explaining there. But,
So that could be your research. Level of obesity and rise of weight consumption.
So there we do have that different consumption pattern style, like more of wheat and rice there.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that might lead to an instrument because, you know, you wouldn't expect whether you're rice or wheat eaters to affect your life expectancy, except through affecting your health through your diet. I mean, but not directly. It's not going to. So I don't know if that might be a good measure.
Okay, so one good suggestion came out.
Yeah.
That was really good. So
Thank
can we move to
No
debate specific?
It's not coming up, I don't know why.
Oh, this you next, Sonakshi?
Yeah.
Because of my Okay, we can do with that, all slides.
It's not even visible.
You use that use slideshow? Split that?
That is what I used.
You just put them all up and just walk through it. I think.
Yeah, let's do that because 5 minutes will otherwise spend doing
It's not coming up only. This thing
Even
is
this comes.
equation for demand, which is P1 is equal to Q1 minus
Oh, you're starting from the model. Tell us the research question.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So the point is, can an increase in footfall in the tourism industry can it lead to a decline in the footfall tomorrow? So the point is, so I have made a two-stage game where in stage 1 firms can choose on the fixed investment, then they can have F1 and F2 for firm 1 and firm 2 respectively. And in the second, so these investments are abatement, sort of abatement. So if they are investing, whatever they are producing, its impact on environment will get reduced. And in the second stage, they can choose for the output that they want to produce. So
Yeah, the question was coming. Yeah, this is fine.
So, so demand is a function. So for P1, I have this A minus Q1 minus alpha Q2 plus R beta minus K1 Q1 minus K2 Q2. This is basically, so generally we have this A minus Q1 minus Q2. This alpha is the term which is to differentiate products. So if alpha is less than 0, it would be net complements, and if alpha is greater than 0, it would be net substitutes. So this R is the premium that a firm can have if the beauty component is higher, and beauty component is given by beta. Higher the production Q1 Q2, lower this net beauty thing, beta minus K1 Q1 minus K2 Q2, and higher the fixed investment, lower will be the K. So K
So
is
say what you mean by beauty and where is the
so beta is the natural beauty parameter,
Okay.
which is just a parameter. So higher the F, lower will be K, and lower will be this net beauty, that is beta minus K1 Q1 minus K2 Q2. And similarly for the other form, and I haven't put any functional form for K right now, but it's just that K prime F is less than 0. Higher the fixed investment, lower will be the negative impact on environment.
So I guess explain the context of this thing. You're looking at two firms that are located in some place with natural
So basically
amenities.
two hotels basically.
Two hotels. Okay, so two hotels, and are they both similar or different in any way? The two hotels, are they different in any way or the same?
So it need not be two hotels also, because one thing is that they can be substitutes or they can be complements. These two firms. So it's like one can be hotel and one can be amusement park. Otherwise, both of them can be hotels. So that is how alpha is there.
Okay. But I mean, what is it that's going to lead them to choose? So the choice variable here is the amount of fixed investment in preserving the environment. And what's going to lead them to choose differently from each other? And why would they choose anything other than zero?
The results do show that there is some positive investment possible in case of Purna model and Burton model if I solve them.
Okay.
And the results are that if firms play the Purna game and the firms play Purna game in the second stage and have and the goods are substitutes, then there would be no investment. For the Burton, it's the opposite case. So a necessary condition for positive fixed investment is that goods should be complements in Purna model. That is like a hotel and an amusement park. And for the Burton model, it's the opposite. That for positive fixed investment, the goods should be substitutes. Otherwise, there will be no investment. And I also tried to compare.
I mean, do you get investments to be different or same?
So since I have no functional form for investment right now, that is why I have only this necessary and sufficient condition. And so if I just maximize profits with respect to F1 and F2, all I can say is that if alpha is less than 0 or greater than 0, whether I'll be able to find some optimum F or not. Okay.
So I guess my suggestion first would be just maybe try to develop a simple story in plain English for what is going on here. We start with, so what is the problem you're trying to solve?
So it's basically that do firms get benefited from this natural beauty, and if they get benefited, so they should have some extra money. So that is R into beta minus K1 Q1 plus K2 minus K2 Q2. So higher the beauty, net beauty, higher is the premium that they can earn.
Okay. I mean, it depends, right? It depends on whether the consumers are willing to. It depends on the demand function that they're facing, and whether is this a case where you have. So the beauty is available for all. You can have one hotel, you can have 50 hotels. Then these hotels have to compete with each other for customers. They're all facing the same. What differentiates this? Is this one closer to the park, or closer to the trail, or is this better view, or why would it command a premium compared to other hotels? And so maybe this is the one which has the best view and the closest location, and it has the greatest interest in preserving that rather than ones that are further away. So something, there has to be some. So what is the problem in that sense that you're dealing with, that you're trying to solve? Something like that would make it clearer to understand, what is the right model to set up for that.
So right now, because both the firms get benefited in the same manner, as I have the same component plus R beta minus K1 Q1 minus K2.
Yeah, but the benefits depend not only on the natural beauty that they are providing, but it depends upon, are they, okay, even if you think that they are, the thing with the chrono duopoly is that there has to be some differentiation between the two firms, right? That's why they're a duopoly and not a perfectly competitive. So what makes them different? If they're both benefiting the same and they're providing customers access to the same environmental amenities, what's differentiating them? One from the other. So imagine a scenario that you want to explain, and I think that realism will make this a more compelling story. That's what I would suggest.
So do you have any ideas on empirical thing that you?
Yeah, so as suggested by you only, so if we can have a cost benefit analysis regarding if there is a regulation that will restrict tourism, and then there is other alternative that you have ecotourism. So if we can have some sort of cost benefit analysis, that does a place get benefited from ecotourism rather than having restrictions on tourism, if that can be possible. Next to me.
Yeah, I mean, so is that something you want to do econometrically, or do you want to do like a simulation, or I mean, sort of again, if you don't already, I mean, I think it'd be hard to get real data to do this, but you could do this with simulation with some like plausible values. But you know, if you set up your numerical model, set up your theoretical model, and then you can test it with some plausible assumptions about elasticity of demand or level of differentiation, and you know, but right now in your model, you know, you don't have any option for preserving the environment by itself without allowing for tourism. I mean, so you have to set up the problem in a way that will lead you to the comparison that you want to do at the end. That's the question you want to ask. And so in some ways what you need, I mean, I would imagine what you need is and that's a different question. I think the question you're trying to solve is, you know, can firms benefit and provide ecosystem services at the same time? Right? That's sort of the question you're trying to.
Do they have the there's some incentive for them to do it on their own?
Yeah. That's the question you're trying to, which is a different question than the cost-benefit one. Is should you let the environment be protected, or should you allow for ecotourism, which means, and what is the trade-off between, you know, protecting the environment and getting resources to protect it? You know, if you so yeah, I think it needs a little bit more thought. I mean, one could think of scenarios where, you know, you could say, well, you could protect it, like let's say a national park. You can protect a national park by just preserving it and banning any tourists from entering it. And you can say, okay, if you do that, this is how the environmental quality will improve. It can gradually become more and more pristine and it will kind of beautiful, and this is the function. It might have like an environmental quality function, but it'll cost a lot of resources, because when if you allow tourists, they will pay the tickets, and there will be some other industry that will develop. It will, you know, a boating industry and a little stand and this and that, and generate some resources. So you may not have the same environmental quality, but you have financial resources that will make it more sustainable. So, and then under what conditions, and ultimately which of those two you choose depend upon social willingness to pay. Are you willing to pay the high price of reaching a pristine environment, or are you willing, you know, with nobody enjoying it? It's just out there and nobody can visit and see it, and then it's got non-use value. There's no use value. Versus you allow some use value, and then so there are various ways you can set it up. And I think you need to think about which way you are interested in setting it up.
And even in the model, should we have some dynamic component to have this thing made?
If you think that you know your environmental quality function has to be dynamic, I mean, that you know it's like if you're thinking of trees, you know, trees are not going to grow overnight. So the density of the trees will depend upon when you planted them and how long it takes to grow them. And there's a dynamic growth function there. So then you need dynamics. But if you're interested in looking at water quality of the river, you know, or something like that, you know, then you don't necessarily need dynamic So it depends on what type of what is this? Is there a stock wearable that you have to look at? I'm not sure if dynamics, it'll complicate your thing, but I don't know if you need dynamics. I think what's needed is more. Firstly, I'd start with a simple static model and just try to explain what are the things you're trying to compare, and then build up from there to the more complicated one.
Okay, thank you. So, can we have the next?
Madam, also when we assume tourism, then it also includes like ecotourism. You have medical tourism and business tourism or academic tourism. Then how do you demarcate each form of tourism from one another, and then give the input to each factor differently?
I think with medical tourism or academic tourism is that these are private goods. These are excludable goods. You only get the medical care if you pay for it. You only get you go to the university in another country if you pay for it. So there is no externality there. Whereas with ecotourism, one hotel can invest in preserving it, but everybody benefits from it. So will the hotel have the incentive to protect it, except to the extent that it benefits them, and they may not do it. So you need to have cooperative action. All the hotels need to have agree to do it. Otherwise, no one hotel will benefit enough to make it work. So it's a different type of problem because of that.
Okay, maybe you have to do without slides. Let's just have it, Charu. It's close to 5. You can see your slides, right? So you can just talk about it.
So basically, growing concern about the climate change has increased interest in analyzing the ways to reduce the emissions. So my focus is on the transport sector, which is accounting for 23.58% of the energy consumption in 2014-15. So there has been the increase in the fuel consumption by 10.7% to 196.48 million tons in 2016. So one of the way to reduce this fuel consumption is the introduction of the fuel economy standards and the labels. So various developed countries like US, Canada, they have already adopted these fuel economy standards and labels. So now the focus has fallen on the developing countries. In 2009, China also adopted, and now India is planning to introduce these fuel economy standards and labels. So these star products, So basically, these star label products are already being introduced for the appliances by Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So you would have seen these star products for air conditioner, refrigerator. So now there is a plan for introducing these star labels for the cars. So these star labels will provide the information about the fuel consumption and along with the star rating from 1 to 5 star, 5 star being the most fuel efficient car. So I want to see whether consumers are willing to pay a higher amount for these star labeled products. So there are two main objectives of this study. One is to evaluate the consumer preferences for these fuel efficient products, and second, I want to see the effect of the green network on such preferences. So consumers' preferences are motivated by their intrinsic motivation, their internal urge for the environment, be motivated by the social norms, which is the other consumers' behavior. So the social norms are evolving from the networks which are being formed by the individuals. So my focus is on the green network effect. When the consumer's valuation for the product increases with more number of consumers consuming that product. So I want to see how the consumer's willingness to pay is affected by the green network.
And then along with that, I want to examine the effect of the incentives which is being provided, how incentives modify the preferences of the potential car buyers. So to test this, we use the choice experiment. So in discrete choice experiments, the respondents are given hypothetical settings. So they are given hypothetical alternatives to choose from, and each alternative is a combination of various attributes. So in my choice experiment, I have taken 3 alternatives and combined star 4 and 5 as high star label car. Star 3 I have it as moderate star label car, and the last is presently available, which is the unlabeled car. And each alternative, it is the combination of price, mileage, engine, transmission and network. So this green network, I capture it by market share of friends, family, neighbors, colleagues. In the beginning of this choice experiment in the survey, each respondent is asked what is the price at which they are willing to purchase their car in future. So that price we call it as reference price. So price has 5 levels, 10%, 20, 30, 40 or 50% higher than your reference price. The high star label car has better mileage. So I keep the levels for mileage as 20 and 24 for high star label car. And for moderate star label has comparatively lesser mileage, so 16, 20. And presently I keep a hypothetical value of 13. And for engine, I have kept 3 values up to 1000 cc, from 1000 to 1500 cc and more than 1500. Transmission it could be either manual or automatic. And for green network, I fix the values at 20% and 60%. So along with this choice experiment, it is being supplemented by the questions on socio-economic characteristics like age, income, gender. Then I have questions on driving habits, car ownership, and like decisions on purchasing cars. Then we have environment concern, social interaction and environmental knowledge. So these network effect I even capture like with the social interaction questions like how often do you invite your friends to your home or you visit their homes, friends, colleagues or relatives. And then how often do you meet them during a month outside your home. Then questions which is capturing the trust parameter, like do you trust your friends and colleagues by do you lend money to them or do you keep your house or home keys with them. So these all I capture with social interactions. In environmental concern, I have included questions like do you consider recommendations from your friends or family while purchasing cars. And then there is some questions on environmental knowledge. So along with that, I incorporate the effect of the incentives. So I inform half of the sample like if you purchase a high star labeled car, that car will be permitted to fly both on odd and even days. So I incorporate this odd even rule by providing them an incentive so that they purchase high star label cars. I want to see their willingness to pay, how it is affected with the incentive. So the econometric model used this conditional logic, random parameter logic and latent class logic model. And survey will be conducted in Delhi for 500 respondents.
How much is already done, Charu?
Close to 300.
Wow.
Yeah.
And she's doing it herself, so not any agency or anything.
So these will be
You have some results?
Yeah, I've just taken it on the basis of 55 respondents on the.
You can just tell us quickly what is an interesting result that you
So
get?
what I see is that consumers are willing to pay 6 lakhs rupees extra for the high star label cars
That's
and
not.
close to 3.7 lakhs extra for the moderate star label car. Then I get the coefficient of price also as negative and significant. And my network effect coefficient is also positive and significant in this 55 sample. So the consumers are willing to pay close to 2,000 rupees extra for the network effect. With the other coefficients, mileage and transmission and engine is insignificant. Maybe it's because of small sample size. It's just a pilot study for 55 respondents.
Oh, just 55 respondents?
Yeah, I just did it.
The
on
pilot,
Okay, so
pilot.
you're going to now do it for the others.
She's
Yeah, I'm
already-
doing the survey once I completed. So I'm thinking even to classify it into groups, like through latent class, like colleagues versus your friends and relatives. How the responses change with that.
You know, like what is your peer group? Is it your colleagues or friends and
Friends.
relatives?
So if you have any comments or any questions, suggestions.
I think it looks pretty good. I think you're doing the choice experiment. There's tricks to doing how you set up the choice design of your choice experiment. You're following the, and I don't know too much about, I'm not an expert on that, but if you're following that, I guess my one thing would be engine displacement. How many was that something why is that added as one of the attributes?
Engine, like quality of the engine matters while purchasing the car.
So from that perspective, lots of things might matter, so safety might matter, or how fast, and so I guess you might want to think about features that consumers care about, like how fast the acceleration time. That's something that, in 60 seconds, how far, what speed it can get to. Safety of the car, and then there are other things, other features of the car that people might care about. Why particularly engine displacement?
There is a limit, like if I cannot just
Yeah,
keep
I
on
know.
adding
Right,
the attributes.
right.
So based on these discussions, I found engine and transmission and as the more relevant variables. So I selected the most important ones which are for the car.
That's good. I actually need to close it.
Okay.
So, yeah. So maybe we can do the rest tomorrow, or how many more students to present? Just one? No, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, we'll try to do it
Let's do
tomorrow.
it tomorrow.